we going to be innovative if we can't even question how we do things? And everything is just non-reflective and following that bouncing ball.
That was the voice of Amanda van de Paverd, the guest on this episode of The Knowledge Mill. I'm your host, Greg Yoakum. Amanda van de Paverd is currently pursuing her PhD at the University of Queensland, building on an extensive career as a consultant and with the Royal Australian Air Force, or the RAAF. Amanda's research explores the practice of maverickism applied at the organisational level to improve innovation, learning, and adaptability in public sector organisations. She has completed her final review and just a few weeks ago submitted her thesis for examination. During her tenure with the RAAF, Amanda specialised in personnel management, organisational design, and workforce optimisation. Her exemplary service included operational duties, earning her a commendation for her significant contributions to the international campaign against terror. Beyond her PhD research, Amanda has publications in defence industry outlets such as The Forge and the Propel Her Australia series. Since transitioning from full-time military service, Amanda has worked as a management consultant, focusing on leadership, change management, and organizational design. She has successfully led reviews, large-scale projects, and cultural change initiatives across diverse sectors, including NGOs, government, health, energy, and resources. Amanda is a proud mother of 2 daughters who inspire her continuous pursuit of knowledge and professional growth. Currently, Amanda serves on the board of directors at Family Services Australia, where she chairs the Human Resources and Governance Committee. She is also a director at Prac Studio, overseeing business operations and management. My conversation with Amanda folded over onto itself a couple of times in ways that I think listeners will find very satisfying. Her journey to and through her PhD candidature will serve as a valuable reminder that being purpose-driven in your life and work will take you further than maybe you think you can go. This episode of The Knowledge Mill was recorded at the University of Queensland in Brisbane on June 12, 2025. Show notes, including links to more information on some of the topics that Amanda and I discuss, can be found at theknowledgemill.com/episode 20. That's episode and the numerals 2 and 0. Hi, Amanda. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We are here on your beautiful campus. I was telling you before we started recording, this is my second time on your beautiful campus here at the University of Queensland. Classic sandstone architecture and a standalone campus sort of along the river. It's a very beautiful scene.
Oh, it is. I don't come out here very often because I work mostly from home, but whenever I come out here, I do think it's such a beautiful place to be and to walk around in the jacaranda trees and the river.
Well, yeah, that's right. Even as I was pulling in today, my wife dropped me off this morning to come and meet you, and I was saying, in between these conversations I'm having today, I'm just going to go for a walk around the campus and just take this all in. And I find it very, it makes me feel more scholarly to be on a campus like this.
I definitely think it's a privilege to have this campus. It's beautiful. And I often go for walks around. I do a lot of exercise. It's just part of what I do. So yeah. I do a lot of weightlifting and runs and walks, although I'm getting a bit old now. So the running has dropped off a little bit from what I used to do.
Fair enough. I'll say that's why I don't run too. Well, could you tell us a little bit about how you found yourself doing a PhD here?
Absolutely. So it's a long story, sorry.
I like long stories.
So I used to be in defence, so a uniformed defence member, and I left in 2014 and I started doing a lot of consulting work, and I worked for a lot of public sector organisations. And over COVID, I went back and did a defence contract. And one of the things that really kind of stood out to me was that public sector organisations, and particularly defence, because it is very structured, has very much a follow the bouncing ball, process-driven approach to the way that they do business. Now, my other half is an architect, and we have an architecture company, and he uses design thinking. And as part of that process, it is always, how can we do this better? And what I found the difference between a lot of public sector organisations and, the design thinking principles is that when you're so process-based, you stop asking whether or not this is the best way to do it. And you stop asking questions about, can we do this better? Is this innovative? And it becomes really unreflective. And you kind of go, okay, so how are we going to be innovative if we can't even question how we do things? And everything is just non-reflective and following that bouncing ball. That became particularly important during the COVID period, where a lot of things were changing rapidly and we needed to work out how to do business differently. But the default is always, okay, so what does the policy say? And so that kind of made me question, okay, so there's a lot of public sector organisations out there who have to respond to volatile and uncertain environments. However, they're fundamentally bureaucratic. They're designed based on don't question things, follow the bouncing ball, very strict structure and processes. Yet they're the ones that have to respond to these rapidly changing and actually life-threatening in some cases environments. And they don't have the flexibility. They don't have the innovation to be keeping up with those things. And so I kind of went back to, for me, this kind of like sparked this is a really big problem. How are these organizations going to respond and change rapidly? And particularly if you're heading towards like war, or you're heading towards like a pandemic and you're a health organization, or you're a police organization and you're having to respond to something, how do you do that if you actually can't even fundamentally change basic process? You're going to be doing things inefficiently. And, we're not going to serve the public as best as we can. And so that became like a really big problem for me. And I was really motivated to kind of go, how can we do this better? And then something that really has stuck with me always from having a background in defence is that defence in particular, and most public service organisations, are really bound by this sense of service and driven by this sense of the greater good, like delivering for the community. And I found this research on maverickism, which is, people who disrupt and they question things, but they do so for the benefit of the organisation, and they do so in a contextual manner driven by this concept of higher order values. And I found that really fascinating. I'm like, okay, so if a public sector organisation could harness that at the organisation level, where you can have value-based disruption, you could really get some beneficial factors and start to question some of these things that need to be questioned, but within bounded disruption. And so that was really kind of the motivating factor for me, and that's kind of the path I've gone down.
Right.
And yeah, it was basically just this like big complex problem that I was like, there has to be a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really powerful because you're talking about public organizations who ostensibly exist to serve the public. And then part of design thinking, of course, is to empathize with end users, to understand their unmet needs and desires. And so if organizations are not doing that, they're not even understanding the people that they're meant to be serving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't go into design thinking as such. I embed it in Maverickism. And I think what's important about that is because public sector transformation and change has always been, and since the 90s, has really focused on entrepreneurship. And it's like, entrepreneurship just does not fit with public sector organisations for a number of reasons. And so I've tried to kind of reshape that conversation about how to bring in the innovative side of entrepreneurship, but actually embed it in that values-based decision making.
Yeah, because there's an incentive problem with entrepreneurship, isn't there? Because in the business context, of course, the idea of being an entrepreneur is starting something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Less about running something.
Yeah. And it's externally focused. And ultimately in public sector, you kind of want to be focused on who you're serving and the community and, those kind of purpose-driven organizations.
I think you're right that this is not fit for purpose. And so I'm interested about this idea of maverickism that you've raised. I haven't encountered this concept before. Could you kind of walk me through what that is and what it looked like in your research?
Sure. I mean, there's not a lot of literature on maverickism. And in fact, so my supervisor, she did her PhD on maverickism. And I found her, I came across her research whilst I was kind of stumbling across this this problem, and I was just like, oh my God, that's it.
Yeah, right.
She did the Maverick habitus. So, what is it that makes up a maverick, and what are their dispositions that make them who they are? And that's kind of where I went through her research, and I'm like, well, these people are disruptive and they're innovative, but they're politically savvy, and they're bounded in the way that they disrupt. They're not just doing it for the sake of disruption. They're doing it for the benefit of the organisation. And so I was really interested in that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of started to ignite my passion a little bit about exploring this further. And I found some other research that showed that that they're more beneficial, and they can be disruptive and they can have negative effects. But functional maverickism can actually be really, really beneficial for the organisation. And in fact, whilst dysfunctional maverickism, and if it's not guided and it's not purpose driven, can be actually negative for teams and things like that. If it's guided and purpose-driven and it has those clear goals, it can have some fundamental, transformative, beneficial impact on organisations. They can act as great change agents. There's literature saying that that actually they can improve team dynamics in diversity of thought. So they can help facilitate the flow of new ideas and help give other people voices. I think there was a lot of really interesting things there that had kind of, because it's not widely known about and it's not widely published, these snippets of absolute gold were just kind of doing nothing and not making as much impact as I think that they could.
Yeah. Because there's that sort of exists. Maverickism, it seems to me, exists at this intersection of these different things we've been talking about. Like entrepreneurs, they have this phrase, move fast and break things. But of course, that leaves off the but why? Why would we break things? And so if you have the intention, then it seems like we're moving into something like maverickism. And if you have the bounded nature of it, like within the organizational practice, the mission and vision, what are we actually here to do? This does seem like it would be really powerful in all these ways that you're mentioning. Are you able to share any examples of how Mavericks do this, like what this looks like in practice?
Well, as I said, my supervisor did a lot of research on Mavericks, and she actually did a publication that demonstrated the separation between entrepreneurs, innovators, and Mavericks, and was able to demonstrate some overlapping traits and what differentiated them. And so, some of the overlapping traits were creativity and innovation and a little bit of disruption. But really, for me, what set Mavericks apart was, one, it was bounded, two, it was internally focused, and three, it was they were guided by values. So those were the key differentiators for me, basically, that linked to my research. So I, in my studies, I provided an example of beneficial disruption that's, within the bounds of higher order values. You're not breaking laws, you're not breaking, you're doing things and you're disrupting a little bit, but you know where those kind of, those barriers
limits,
are. So it's a little bit of testing and adjusting. And I think there is some other research by Gardner and Jackson that talks about them being deep learners. And that was the other fundamental part for me, is that, rather than being these, entrepreneurs that are out there kind of looking at new markets and things like they're deep learners. They're just testing and adjusting.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was what it came back to, that, we were talking about design thinking earlier, and that's what it came back to, is that testing and adjusting.
Yeah.
And that learning capability, because specifically for public sector organisations, you want to see them be able to evolve.
Yes.
and evolve in a kind of organic, responsive way where it's not clunky. And I think it becomes, because it's so bounded, so structured, and so process-based, any kind of change becomes really difficult because they've got so much structural inertia. And so this kind of concept of maverickism could be so transformational to just drive that learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it occurs to me, this is also similar to what people might call like a devil's advocate. But I don't think that a devil's advocate is acting in good faith, in the sense of, when I hear devil's advocate, I think of someone who's just challenging the status quo just because they feel like someone needs to, versus what you're describing with that learning mindset of, I'm questioning you because I want to understand more why you're doing what you're doing, the way that you're doing it, and maybe I'll have some feedback, maybe I won't. But then, from my view, the power of doing that is, maybe, if you're in a work in progress meeting and you're all sharing notes about the work you're doing on projects, and I'm questioning someone about a project they're doing, why did you do that the way you did it? What about XYZ? Did you think about ABC? And maybe I don't have anything to say about that then, but now I have that information and I know why they acted the way they did in that context when faced with that situation. And the next time I see that, I'm going to have that information and I'm going to be empowered to engage with that. Whereas if I'm just receiving information passively all the time, then I'm having to go through a process of self-negotiation at every move, rather than moving with some agency.
Yeah. Actually, one of the people I interviewed spoke about that. That was one thing that one of the senior leaders I interviewed talked about, that sense of agency. And she said, some people just have more of a sense of agency than others. And so one of the things that I reflected on after that was, well, what gives some people a sense of agency versus others who don't feel they have that sense of agency? And then looking at the organisational factors and the environmental factors that impacted that. So was it a leader that made you feel more empowered to do that? Or was it, self-confidence, or what was that? So I really kind of went into, what are the factors that make people feel comfortable in challenging things or looking to do things better? And it was really interesting because a lot of the people that I interviewed had been in the organisation for a really long time, and they'd been in different environments where they had different subcultures and things, and they could clearly articulate the difference between environments that they felt that they could challenge things and environments where they didn't feel comfortable doing that. And leadership played a big role in that, but also peer behaviour. So, how peers would react to that.
That is one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because I'm thinking this whole time that, from the Maverick side of things, this all sounds good. I'm also thinking about the people who are being questioned. What can happen there? Could they become defensive? What kind of reactions did you see?
Yeah, absolutely. And in those kind of really systemic environments where change doesn't happen very frequently and people get very comfortable in their spaces, they were reacting quite, with, that's never going to work. And one person described when they were trying to make change as, they described feeling really lonely because of the social isolation. And another person described tall poppy syndrome, where they just try and bring you down. So there was a lot of really negative peer behaviour that impacted people's willingness to challenge. And so that was one of the biggest factors. There was also a lot of, as you can imagine, in public sector environments, they're political. And so on top of that, they've got, if you rock the boat, you might not get promoted.
Yeah.
And so I found, particularly with the middle management sector, the middle management layer, they were really, really cautious not to rock the boat because it really could impact their career. They may not be able to go anywhere post that if they made the wrong move. And so what you see from that is the impact is risk aversion. Chronic risk aversion, where nobody wants to ask any questions, nobody wants to do anything outside of the box, because if it doesn't turn out right, if somebody doesn't like it, it's all going to come down, it's going to come back to you, and you won't get promoted.
And then that that's your reputation. Like that can, in the public sector, it's deceptively a small community, for lack of a better word. Even if you work in, my wife used to work in government, and she knew people in different departments and functions across different levels, and people move jobs, but they tend to stay within government. And so they all sort of know each other. It's this funny thing where it's this huge organization, but everyone seems to know, like, be 1 or 2 degrees connected to everyone else. And so, yeah, that could really be a problem for you if you wanted to stay in that sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, one of the interviewees commented that, some bosses, you make a mistake and you're dead to them.
Yeah.
So,
and that costs you opportunities. You won't be assigned projects, and you won't be picked to go to the next conference.
Yeah. Huge impacts. So, the kind of peer and leadership support environment makes a big difference about whether or not people are willing to pursue new ideas, to look at anything innovative, and to challenge the status quo. So without supportive environments that actually facilitate people to question things without negative impacts, you're just not going to see those behaviours.
Yeah. How do we go about creating those kind of environments then?
Well, I think one of the things is, and one of the quotes that I really liked is giving you enough rope to push the boundaries a little bit, but not enough to hang yourself. Autonomy is important. Mm-hmm. You need to be feeling empowered to test. And if you don't feel empowered to test and to learn and to adjust, then you're kind of just stagnating, right? And so the other thing is just having somebody who will help you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be the entire workforce. It doesn't need to be everybody's on your side. But if there's just one person who's willing to say, hey, you know what? This could be interesting. Why don't we have a look at it?
Yeah.
That can make the world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody wins.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And so one of my participants talked about the Maverick enabler.
Okay. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So someone who isn't a Maverick themselves but is willing to support the Maverick.
Yeah.
And help them kind of find out what the boundaries are and what the issues are and support them in challenging them. And so whilst they wouldn't put their own head out there, they're willing to kind of be in the background and support them to do what they need to do. And I think those people are more important than what you would imagine, because they can just give someone the confidence to go, you know what, you're not in this alone.
Yeah.
And, as I said before about that, when there's not a supportive environment and the social isolation that goes with pushing the boundaries in an environment that's hostile, just having someone by your side to say, hey, this is okay, we'll give it a go, makes all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I wonder if some of that comes back to personality differences, that maybe Mavericks would be more likely to be extroverted, maybe a Maverick enabler might be more likely to be introverted, and kind of the way people move within organizations.
So there is some research that talks about personality and Mavericks. The way that I look at it is that you can be a Maverick in one workplace and you can not be considered a Maverick in another. So if you're an outgoing person, or you're a person who challenges the status quo and you're creative and politically savvy and you're working for a company like Google, you're not going to stand out and you're not going to be considered a Maverick. You're just going to be considered one of the team.
Yeah.
If you do that in a really traditional organization that doesn't have creative people, that isn't looking at reflective learning approaches to how they do business, then you're going to be seen as a Maverick.
Yeah.
So context matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that shapes our perceptions of who people are. And then in hand, we kind of, as a result of the bucket you get put in that organization, that kind of shapes what we feel is and isn't acceptable in that environment. So the environments that we're in can change the way we're viewed. And so in one environment, we might be seen as a disruptor, and in another environment, we might just be seen as, fairly standard.
Meeting expectations.
Yeah, meeting expectations. So, I think, there are definitely people that are more outgoing and are more politically savvy and have those personality traits, but there are environments that facilitate those dispositions more easily than others. So in organisations where, like, if we talk about someone like 3M, where they have like brainstorming meetings and they are reflective in the way that they approach developing new products and things like that, you know, a maverick isn't going to be seen as a maverick. They're just going to be, and you know, those kind of learning and those learning and reflective processes are just how they do business. Whereas if you go into a public sector organisation where nobody's really reflecting on the processes, and nobody's looking at creative ways of doing things, nobody's trying to create, then certainly you're going to be seen as a bit different.
I'm imagining someone who works at Google and is used to everybody thinking this way, who then moves into a public sector job.
Yeah, absolutely. Crazy.
Just like, why is no one asking these questions? We're just doing this the way we've always done it? Okay. That can be very jarring.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think, you know, and the type of people that go into public sector are probably, you know, you get a bit of bias in the kind of personalities you're getting in that. And of course, those environmental factors shape what you will and won't do and what's considered, you know, socially acceptable behaviour in that environment. And over time, that shapes who you are.
What you're describing to me, and maybe to people listening, sounds like a big game.
Yes.
And there are people playing different avatars within the game, and there are rules depending on what board you have. If it's this is the Google board and this is the government board, depending on which one you're playing with has different rules. And it's for me as an introvert, it's too much. I'm uncomfortable having to read the room.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the field of play you're in, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got, you know, if you're a natural basketball player, you're super tall and you can slam dunk, then you're going to be really valuable and you're going to be really useful on a basketball court.
Yeah.
But, you know, you may not be so good in a gymnastics stadium. What is valuable in one field of play and what's considered important is very different. And as you would imagine, so are the rules. And so that definitely shapes the way that we approach different things and the way that we kind of adjust ourselves to fit those fields.
Do you think that mavericks see themselves as mavericks, like they are aware that they are playing this role within the organization, or is this just the way they are?
No, I don't think they always think they are. Although I did have one that was obviously a maverick and knew full well that they were a maverick, and I loved that about them. But most mavericks are kind of like, well, you know, maybe I did challenge a little bit, but there was good reason for it. And it's always justifying their disruptive behaviour because, oh, well, I did it for this reason. And so they're not seeing themselves as disruptive. They're just like saying, well, I'm just trying to help the organisation. I just want to see it do better. And, you know, I think that's the part of mavericks that I love.
Yeah, that's right. They're in it for the right reasons.
Yeah, and they're not challenging things because they want to get promoted or they want to be seen as, you know, some kind of superhero. They're doing it because they just think it's the right thing to do.
I'd be interested to know, because you're a very ambitious person. We talked a bit before we started recording about different things happening in your life, even as you're doing the PhD, and you've alluded to a couple of them in the conversation so far. But do you see yourself as a maverick in the way that you approach your life and work? I
don't, but as I said earlier, most mavericks don't actually acknowledge their own maverickism. So, no, I wouldn't see myself as a maverick, but again, like I do, you know, one of the most important things for my research is that it has an impact. I see ambition as really important. You know, I have 2 children and both of them are girls, and I want to see that I want to show them that, you know, just because you have kids doesn't mean your career's over, and I want to show them that I'm driven and I want to make an impact in what I do. And my research is part of that. You know, I do a lot of different things to make an impact in my community and in the things that I do. And you can see that in the fact, you know, I'm an ex-defence person. So the sense of service to the community is like, it is embedded in who I am. I volunteer for a not-for-profit that helps families. So I sit on the board for a not-for-profit that supports families in need. And, that is just, it's part of that sense of service for me. But incredibly important to me is not losing that ambition, not losing that sight of, to build resilience in your life, you need more than one thing.
Mm-hmm.
I need more than one thing. And I think, the PhD journey is hard, right?
Yep.
But for me, it has been amazing. Like I am a lifelong learner, like learning is important to me. And ultimately, even my PhD is about helping organisations to learn. And I want to kind of instill that in my children as well, that learning is a big important factor in everything that you do. And curiosity, we talked a little bit about curiosity before we started as well. And I think having that, it kind of drives a little bit of ambition, even if you don't really mean it to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I feel like I haven't made the impact yet that I want to make. I still want to be supporting and helping people. And, I haven't kind of worked out how I'm going to do that yet, but I will continue to strive to improve and to be better every day. And maybe that's incrementally and, in everything I do, whether that's how much I lift when I go weightlifting, or whether that's the way I approach parenting, or whether that's in, making my thesis just that little bit better before submission. I really do have that ambition to just be better.
Yep.
And I think that as a mother, that's really important, because when you become a mother, you really do lose yourself a little bit. Your sense of identity is kind of all in turmoil, because you had a previous identity that was about you and the things that you do and about your career and all of these things. And then all of a sudden, your entire life is just about keeping another person alive.
Yeah. Suddenly new stakeholders.
Yeah. There's all these new, and they demand all of your time. And then you kind of like, as I said, I was super ambitious, and I was like, I have ambitions to be some great leader in an organisation and make these huge impacts, and I'm like, I can't do that while I have children, because they demand so much of my time. So how do I pursue something that is still making an impact but is flexible and I can do in my own time, and when I need to, I can go pick up my my sick kids and all those things. So those kind of things overlapped a little bit in, fortuitous timing, in that this big problem of my PhD appeared to me at the same time I had my second child. So at the time I had been consulting for a Big Four and then doing a defence contract over COVID. I was actually on maternity leave when they asked me to do my contract.
Right.
So, I had to they were very flexible and kind of let me do things a bit differently, because, I had a toddler and a baby, and I did this contract, and throughout the contract, that's when this idea came to me about the PhD and how would I solve those big complex problems. And I was like, well, actually, we were talking about this as well, is Australia has a really great structure in place to support PhD students in terms of scholarships. And I was reading about Maverickism, and I called up my now supervisor, and I had conversations with her, and I really clicked with her as well. And I felt like if I'm going to go on this journey, I feel like this person is the right person to go on the journey with me. I have a lot of respect for her, and I feel like both of my supervisors are amazingly supportive, and I feel like they have made this journey so special, because they both have consulting backgrounds. Like they both have a career before academia.
Yeah, right.
And so they understand my drivers.
Yeah.
They understand that I'm not an academic, and I'm kind of more of a practitioner, and I'm doing this because I want to see organisations do better, and they get that. And they're also, they kind of just understand me and have been incredible support for me. So I think that's made a big factor. So, you know, when people are asking me, how do I do all these things? I feel like, you know, it's like going back to that workplace. If you've got somebody supporting you through that journey, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, that's it. And it really does. I went about my PhD the same way. And I would even go so far as to say I was less interested in doing an actual PhD and more so interested in working with the professor who ended up being my supervisor. That was the initial interest that I had, was just, you know, I met him. He was teaching coursework in my master's, and I was just curious about his research, and we just had a beer one day, and I was sort of saying like, oh, you know, I was sort of thinking about doing some research or maybe even a PhD, and he walked me through what that would look like. And in the end, he talked me into it in about 5 minutes. But it very much started with, I want to work with you. And what shape that takes, I don't even really care. But that was my starting point. And I think that means that actually, I think, helps facilitate striking that balance that you're describing. Because there's a difference between, I want to sit on a board, I want to be a good mother, I want to also do a PhD, I want to run this business with my partner, and knowing that you want to do these things, if not also other things, and then thinking, how can they play with each other, and how can I have it both ways in some instances? And that becomes about, I think, doing it the right way, for want of a better way of describing it. And that's not to suggest other people were doing it the wrong way, but the right way for you, where if you are with supervisors who are cut from the same cloth, share your worldview, your perspective, your ambitions, then you're not swimming against the current, which would make it just that much more difficult.
Yeah, I really think it is that the right way for you.
Yeah. And
having something that reflects who you are and what is important to you and what your priorities are. And I feel like I've had, you know, the best team that have my interests at heart and have been patient with me. And, you know, I feel like, I don't know whether it would be the same journey again with somebody else, you know. I think that's something special, right? Like, but yeah, the whole journey has been interesting, and all of these different things that I do, although they seem very disparate, they all contribute something to having an interesting perspective. You know, like my partner, for example, being an architect, just like in our architecture company, he always asks me what I think of his designs. And I'm often, you know, I'm a very black and white person, so I'm very blunt. If I don't like it, it's very, I don't like this. And, you know, he never takes that personally. It is, okay, so what don't you like about this?
Yeah.
And we have these really fascinating conversations about how to move forward in what he's doing. And even though I'm not an architect, but having those views and working together about, well, why don't you like this? And, you know, and I'm a very practical person, and sometimes it's just about like practical sense, and others it's about it's overly complex or whatever. But it was something that, as I said, it really highlighted to me the lack of reflective practice and learning approaches in other organisations, because it was so, it doesn't matter. What we need to do is understand what is somebody else's opinion, and why do they come from that perspective, and, you know, taking on different bits of information and going, okay, so is this a problem or is it not a problem?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I've really loved that process. And it's such, you know, it's been a big learning experience for me, and it's fed part of my PhD research, and it's fed a whole lot of different ideas in the way that I do things.
Yeah. That's kind of the reason that I wanted to start this podcast, is because inevitably there are elements of your PhD journey that will never go into your thesis. It's not going to be explicitly written on the page. That the curiosity generated by your partnership fed into XYZ in your experimental design or your interpretation of your findings or something like that. But you know that it did, and I find those stories fascinating. Because even, of course, you're describing reflecting upon practice, but in so doing, you're reflecting upon your practice. And so you're obviously taking that mindset into everything that you do. And it sounds like, I would say that you've been lucky, but that's the wrong word. You've been fortunate to be able to build a network, a supportive network of people who are the same and want to behave that way. And it keeps you all moving forward, which also, of course, in obvious ways connects to the research that you've done. I think it's, you were speaking before about constantly being ambitious and wanting to push and be the best. And I think that you're near it because you're near the end of the PhD. So you're very close to a point where I think everybody gets to, where you finally hit send and the thesis goes away to your examiners and you can't do anything. It's out there and all you have is time while you're waiting for it to come back, that you can't possibly be improving it. And so it forces you to just sit with it and realize, wow, I did a thing. And that was a good thing that I did. And those moments are rare, but that one is forced upon you. And so it's coming. And I hope you enjoy it, because it's very easy, I think, for ambitious people to feel like they're not going at the pace they want to go because they're constantly pushing the finish line out. And so you feel like maybe you're not getting there, but actually you're making so much progress in terms of the distance that you've covered.
Yeah, actually, that is just incredibly accurate. I was actually having a conversation just before we sat down about, I had timeframes for myself. I mean, those timeframes are completely irrelevant and unnecessary, but I had timeframes for myself. And, I'm starting to creep up on that time frame, and but there's also a level of perfectionism where I'm still editing and I'm still doing things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a limitation to how long I can do that.
Eventually you must click send.
Eventually I must click send, and it's going to be very, very soon. So, it's never going to feel 100%. But, it's balancing between the trying to get it to be everything that you hoped it would be. And, how long do I drag this out for? I'm actually I'm kind of, I've only done about just over three and a half. Well, I'm creeping up to the 3.5 year mark. So, I haven't spent an incredible amount of time. But yeah, I think once it's gone, it's going to be both a huge weight and a huge kind of, it's going to be hard, because I've actually truly loved this experience. It is hard, yes. We were talking about this earlier about, you actually kind of feel more stupid doing a PhD, because you spend so much time questioning yourself and questioning, and learning different things. And the more you learn, the more you realize there's a lot you don't know.
Yep, that's right. You keep finding new PhDs to do.
Yeah. And there's like so much to it, and you're trying to put so much into your PhD because there's so many things that you want to talk about, but then you can't put them all in. And then you're kind of like, well, what do you cut out? Like these are all important, and you kind of, it becomes an elephant, and you're trying to eat the elephant, but it's just massive, and so you're trying to like go, okay, so what is really important? But that learning journey, I feel really privileged to have been able to spend 3.5 years just indulging in learning and in a project that. I just wanted to see things do better, and just kind of work on a hard problem and create something that maybe it won't, but maybe it'll make an impact for somebody, or maybe next time there's a crisis, government organisations will be slightly more efficient because of the research, the years that I've spent trying to help them look at a different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started my PhD, one of the it's interesting, right, that when you start You look up to the people who are almost finishing, and then eventually you become those people. You're helping the ones coming behind you. When I started, there was a guy, Jack Sugden, hi Jack if you're listening, who described to me, he had literally drew a circle on a dead tree sheet of paper and said, this is everything that we know, this circle. And then he just made just the tiniest little pimple on the side of the circle and said, and this is you pushing that circle out. In the grand scheme of things, it's very, very small, but you are pushing it out. And I always try to keep that in mind of, even if there's not an impact that I could point out and say, I did that, I did push our understanding out in some broad way. And that's a non-zero impact. And I think in your case, it's going to be something that you could see one day, even if it's just for yourself. And that would still be a monumental contribution if you're able to implement some of that in, for example, the work that you do with the board that you sit on to help improve people's lives. And then, modeling for your daughters as well, whenever they go into whatever they end up doing one day, to approach things the same way and in a way that's informed by the research that you've just done. I think that moves the needle.
Yeah, I think, and it comes back down to just still being ambitious, just, the impact might not be as monumental as what you hoped, but you're still moving forward.
Yeah.
And, just having that learning mindset of, okay, I'm eating the elephant. It's a big elephant. I'm going to take it one step at a time. And each tiny step, I'm moving forward. And maybe it's not as rapidly as, sometimes you would like, but, you're moving forward. And I think sometimes, when you're in the throes of parenting, and we were talking about this earlier about, you have all these things, whether it's daycare sicknesses or,
just imagining you can stick to a timeline.
Yeah, anything. And everything becomes more difficult, but that doesn't mean that opportunities end. That means that different opportunities open up, and you can reimagine the way that you do things in how you approach your work, in how you approach your impact. Mm-hmm. But for me, I think it was really important to still be me, mm-hmm. And to still be resilient and still be a learner, and keeping that kind of ambitious focus. Because I think, often you kind of lose yourself in maternity leave, and then you're like, okay, so what am I now? And am I capable of these things? And you kind of go through this questioning process of who are you and what does that mean and what am I capable of now? Mm-hmm. And, when you kind of really dig into it, and it's a hard kind of realization to come to, you're capable of a lot.
Yeah.
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 You're still capable of a lot. And I think it's a really hard time to not lose yourself when you're drowning in kind of the throes of parenting, and keep faith in yourself about how you can contribute. And even if that is for a period of time in a different way than you thought it was. I mean, look at the things that I've accomplished in the time that since I've had kids, yes, completely different to what I was doing, prior to that. I can't, I can't go for an 8K run every morning and do all the things that I did before, but I'm just doing different things and making different impacts, and, still being resilient in a different way. And, I think that's a really kind of critical things for individuals and organizations, is kind of having those layers of, what creates our resilience. If one thing's going badly, what else do you have? Do you have other things to support you and to keep you going? And, I think it goes through a lot of different things. If you're still learning and you're still engaged in a lot of different spaces, if one thing's not going right, then at least you have something else.
I think that's a really beautiful place to end that part of the conversation. And from where I'm sitting, we've only been speaking for a little over an hour, but it's been really interesting to hear your story. And for someone who's come into your journey cold, I have the perspective of it really sounds like you've done something powerful here, and I do hope that you get those moments of reflection to to appreciate what you've done and how far you've come, because I can see it from where I'm sitting. So I hope that you get a chance to see it too. But we'll move from here into the last two questions that I ask everyone. And the first one is something that I wanted to ask you along the way, but I've waited until now because the question is what's on the horizon for you. But I'd be particularly interested to know what shape you think your career will take after the PhD.
Oh, that's interesting. Look, I'm not certain. I'm not kind of committing myself to anything. At this point, right now I'm just focused on the submission part, because it does seem like, like you said, it's such a monumental thing, and yeah, it's huge. So right now I'm focusing on just getting there.
Yeah.
But I do think that post this there will be something. I have faith that there will be something. I mean, I'm pretty driven, so usually something turns up.
Yeah. Are you thinking academia or industry or whatever's there?
Look, I would like to continue to research, but I think it's actually, I think for me, it's never like 100% one way or another. I'm more likely to keep the flexibility open. So I'd like to continue to research, but I would also like to make an impact with my research through industry. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, particularly since COVID. One of the great things is that workforce flexibility has increased exponentially, I think, over the last kind of 5 years. I think most organisations accept a little bit of flexibility these days. So I'd like to do some consulting, some, implementation of hopefully my research in industry, whilst I'm also supporting and potentially doing more research about, other ways that we can improve resilience and improve innovation in organisations. So I don't think it's a one or the other. I think it's kind of it's just going to be a continuation journey of, okay, where do I think I can make impact? And, what opportunities are available.
Yep. And then you'll be well placed to take whatever's there, I think, because you have that openness to it. You're not dead set on being an academic, and so that's the hiring for that only happens once a year, and you get a job or you don't, and then it's another year, and you're trying to fill the gaps, and that could be a rough cycle to get stuck in. So I'm sure something will come along at the right time. That'll be good. The last question that I ask everybody is, and maybe it's hard for you because, as you said, you're very focused on finishing right now, but something not related to the PhD that you're excited about at the moment.
Look, my youngest just started prep, and so I'm really excited about watching my kids go through the learning process. There are two aspects of that, right? And some of it's selfish. One is that I'm excited to see them be hungry to learn, and my kids are very hungry learners. My 8-year-old is such a great reader, and she just devours books. And
that's great. Yeah.
And my preppy, she is already reading full books on her own, and I'm so excited for them to have a love of learning. But equally, with this having two in school, it's really kind of starts to free up a bit of my time and a bit more capacity for myself. Which is also super exciting about, redefining what I'm capable of doing and taking not only them through a new journey, but also like, what does that mean for me and the things that I can do in this period. So, I'm really excited for that. It's a pretty, it's watching them grow and watching them be excited about learning is, it's exciting.
Yeah. And you'll be there, to model along the way. I think that's a big part of, especially reading. If kids see you reading, then they'll also be reading. That's something I'm looking forward to. My son only just turned 4. And we're just now getting to the point where we're in that stage where he quote unquote reads books because he's memorized them.
Yeah.
But he's thrilled that he can read a book to me. And so he's obviously got that hunger, and that'll be the next stage is, actually learning how to read. But I'm hoping that I've been trying to find pockets of time and build more reading into my day. And I've started reading on a Kobo, on an e-reader, and he's very curious about that. So hopefully he follows along and wants to keep reading with me. I have this very specific fantasy of a Sunday afternoon. He and I shoot off to a cafe, and we're reading our books, and we're having our coffee and our baby chino and or hot chocolate or whatever, and just kind of being a couple of dudes reading books. So one day I hope that comes true.
I'm sure it will. I mean, I taught both my girls to read before they went to school. I was very much a look, and one of the things I love is trying to help them be curious learners, and so. That was something that I wanted to make sure that I instilled in them, that love. And one of the things that I'm looking at with my 8-year-old now is, critical thinking. Yeah. Critical thinking and kind of starting to just like plant the seed of that for her. Yeah. Which is obviously dangerous as she goes into the teenage years. I'm going to live to regret it, but. Yeah, I think
it'll keep you on your toes.
It's absolutely going to keep me on my toes. But yeah, it's I look forward to, and whether that be my children or other people in the workplace, but instilling a love of learning and personal growth in other people and sharing that the ability to just keep going. To just because you're here right now doesn't mean you have to stay here, and continue to look at how you can do better and help people to reflect on that in their own lives, and actually just spark a little bit of curiosity and spark a little bit of motivation, ambition, trying to get that happening.
Yeah. Well, you've certainly sparked some curiosity for me. I'm going to be looking up some more about Maverickism once I get back to Sydney, because that maybe just pure curiosity, maybe it informs my research. I don't know, but you've sparked my interest. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and share your story with me today. I really enjoyed hearing it, and I hope that listeners out there are inspired by what you've shared with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really appreciated meeting you and getting to know you a little bit and sharing with you.